Welcome back to our Bible study in the book of Genesis. We are at the story now of the flood. And the flood is a multi-chapter story, basically like chapter 6 through chapter 9, or the chapter 6 verse 10 through chapter 9 roughly 19 or so. I'd like to give you an introduction first, and then have you read through the story as it is in the Bible. Most of us don't need to read through the story to kind of know the basic elements. Noah built an ark, took animals, there was a flood, the earth dried up, the animals left. End of story. There's, of course, more to it than that, and we'll get to that. But I'd like to have you first begin with a different story. And I've included that story here on our worksheet. This is a fable from Aesop. So let me just read that for us. A miser, to make sure of his property, sold all that he had and converted it into a great lump of gold. He then hid the gold in a hole in the ground and continually went to visit it and inspect it. Now, this roused the curiosity of one of his workmen who, suspecting that there was a treasure, when his master's back was turned, he went to the spot, dug up the gold, took it away. When the miser returned and found the place empty, he wept and tore his hair. A neighbor who saw him in this extravagant grief and learned the cause of it said this, "Fret yourself no longer, but take a stone, put it in the same place. Think of that as your lump of gold. As you never meant to use the gold, the rock, the stone, will do you as much good as the other." The worth of money is not in its possession, but its use. So that's a story. And I'd like you to think about how stories are told today, how stories are written, told, shown in TV shows or movies or videos or whatever. Virtually every story that you have ever read, and virtually every story that has been written in the past couple of thousand years in the Western world, follows a basic 5-step pattern. Virtually every story starts out with what we might call an introduction or an exposition. It's where we meet the characters that are going to be in the story. We learn the environment, the setting, the scene, and maybe some other pieces of information. We might learn who's in love with who, or who's in conflict with whom, or something like that. In the story that we just read, paragraph number 1 is the introduction. We meet the miser, and he has done a thing in the past, so we're introduced to that information, that he has a great lump of gold. Okay. Again, in virtually every story you've ever read or watched, the next thing that happens is what we might call an incident, a thing, an event that starts the story unfolding, starts the snowball rolling down the mountain. In this case, in paragraph number 2, it's the master hiding the gold in the ground. That happens, kind of in the story. his constant visitation of this gold that he has hidden sets into motion the rest of the story. That hiding and visiting incites curiosity, which incites theft, which incites sorrow, which incites the meaning of the story, and so on and so forth. After that one event, that one thing that kind of started it all, we have what we call rising action. Usually everybody's favorite part of the movie, when everything starts to get really exciting and interesting and we build interest, and things get maybe a little more scary or a little more dynamic, and we might have a complication over here, or a conflict or a crisis, or and everything builds, and secrets are discovered, and who knows what, and what are they going to do with the information, and this character, they face a crisis of decision, or they've done something and then they do it again, is he ever going to be found out? The rising action, which in our case is paragraph number 3. You have the workman stealing the treasure, the miser going back, finding it, having great grief. After all that rising action, we come to a climax, the high point of the story, the point at which everything seems to collide. It's where all the action and all the characters come to their final encounter, their final battle. It is the great discovery, or the great reckoning. In this story, the climax is the neighbor who meets the miser at that point in time of greatest crisis and asks him to reshape his worldview so that a new story may begin. Finally, we have the closing, the last part of the movie, where any loosed threads are tidied up, any final questions are answered, any lingering doubts maybe put to rest, or something like that. And in the case of this story, this is where the moral happens, the moral of the story, the statement of meaning. So if you think about, like I said, any book, any movie, any video that you've ever read, almost every single one of them will follow this 5-step pattern. It's how we write stories. It's how we read stories. It's how we expect stories to be told. It's how we understand the meaning of what's being said. We don't really expect to go into a book or a movie, see the climax, then find out who the characters were, be told what the meaning of everything is, and then see all the conflicts they went through. It's really kind of backwards. I mean, why would you do that? I want to know who the people are first, and then I want to know, okay, so what happens to create the story's motion going forward, and then what experiences do they have that lead up to a meaning, to a point, and then, just tie everything off for me so I feel good. The Wizard of Oz. Just about everybody has seen The Wizard of Oz. We start out the movie in its fun black and white, and we meet all the characters. What happens? What happens to start the story in motion? It's the tornado, which delivers Dorothy to the land of Oz, where she squishes the witch, which sets in motion everything else. And all her travels and all the complications and all the moments of crisis leading up to the discovery of just throw water on the witch. And then we have what we call like a delayed, it's like a delayed climax. It's like, okay, well, we defeated all of our enemies, but she's not back at home yet. So what do we do? So we call it delayed climax. So there's kind of like 2 climaxes. And of course she meets the wizard, and we have a little more rising action about the wizard. And then Ruby Slippers, the final climax, and then the rest of the movie in the black and white ties off all the little ends. When you think about the story of Noah, what in the story is each of the 5 parts? What is the introduction of the characters? What starts everything off? What leads up to the climax? What's all the rising action, and what is the climax of the story, and then what is the resolution to the story? And as you think about that, as you ask folks around you, don't be surprised if out of the 7 people in the room, for instance, 8 of you come up with 8 ideas about what starts the action, what is the climax, what. Don't be surprised if there's a whole lot of different answers to your questions. Now, after you've discussed that, what are the 5 points of the story of Noah? How does it work itself out? After you've discussed that, I'd like you to read the story. Then I'd like you to read the story. And then, after that, then I'd like you to come back and we'll talk about the second worksheet that's a part of this video series. So this would be a great point where you say, read the story of Noah. I shall continue in just a moment, letting you have a space where you can put up a little sign that says, read the Bible. All right, welcome back. Hope you've read through the story of Noah, chapter 6, verse 10 through chapter 9, 19. If you've read through the story, I kind of hope you've felt that it was a little boring and a little repetitive, that it included a whole lot of itty-bitty details that just seem to kind of want to drown you in their detailedness. How many times do we need to be told to take 7 pairs of clean animals, 7 pairs of the birds, and then 7 of this and then 7 of that? How many times do we need to hear that? What's another one in here that we hear a lot? The whole story of the rising of the waters and how many days it took, and the receding of the waters and how many days that took. Okay, why do we need to know all that? The story of, in verse 14, the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth dried out. God said to Noah, go out of the ark and bring forth with you all the birds of the animal. Didn't we just hear that like 2 paragraphs ago? Why do we have to go through this over and over and over again? The crazy thing about just about every story in the Old Testament and a few in the New Testament is that they are not written with that 5-step pattern that you and I are so used to. The stories of the Old Testament are written using a completely different pattern for telling a story. Completely different. In our story, we're used to knowing that the meaning comes like in the climax or right after. In Hebrew stories, the meaning doesn't come at the end. And so as an English reader, a Western reader, you read stories in the Old Testament, you get to the end of the story and you're like, what's the point? Where's the point? Because it's not there. It's actually in a different part of the story. Now, why is that so? Well, one reason is that stories in the Western world have developed to have a certain pattern. Stories in the Eastern part of the world have developed to have a different pattern of telling the story. One of the things I didn't talk about last time was chronology. In the Western world, we love our chronology. We love things to be step by step by step by step. We think meaning is found in the order of things. In the Eastern world, in the Eastern literature, that's not true. They don't give really a rip about chronology. They care about how events are similar to each other. When they happened doesn't matter. The fact that the same person appeared or the same events appeared in different stories or different points in a person's life, that's what matters. So they can tell a story completely out of chronological order and still find meaning. In the Western world, that drives us nuts. So it's just how stories have developed in different cultures over time. In the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, if you imagine an arrowhead, okay, so an arrowhead is a part of an arrow. So you got the arrow and you got the little arrowhead coming here, right? A Hebrew story is written using an arrowhead as its outline, as its pattern. The top parts of the arrowhead, so not the tip, but the top parts, they are going to say, the story's going to begin here and the story's going to end here. It's going to come to its middle here. This part and this part are going to say pretty much the same thing. They're going to say the same thing with almost the same words. As you move closer to the center, this part and this part will be very, very similar. This part and this part will be very, very similar. And this and this and this and this and this and this and this. They'll repeat each other using similar words, similar phrasings, similar ideas. So that when you get down to the point, you have the point of the story, which is very often the only thing that's not repeated. That's one of the ways you can tell it's the point of the story, because it's not repeated. Everything leads up, everything builds to the point of the story. Now, I'm going to veer off just a little bit because this really excites me. So if it doesn't excite you, that's okay. One of the things I like to remember is that the stories in the Old Testament were often oral. They were told. They were oral stories to be orally heard. A great way to tell a story is to repeat parts of it. If you're repeating the beginning and the ending, and then each step in between, not only does the story remain in sequence, you tend not to forget the details because they get repeated. And so the story gets told again and again and again without forgetting anything. And so a story can be passed on generation to generation to generation without ever writing it down, and it's still the same story. It's one of the magic moments of this method of communicating meaning. Now, in the story of Noah, and if you have received this, that's fine. If you haven't, I'd like to take you to Genesis chapter 7. I'm going to get there myself. Verses 21 through 24. Right at the end of chapter 7. 21 to 24. All flesh died that moved on the earth. Verse 22. Everything on dry land died. 23, God blotted out every living thing that was on the ground. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left and those with him in the ark, and the waters prevailed on the ark 150 days. Then go forward a little bit to chapter 8, verse 3. But don't forget 21 through 24, because in 21 through 24, everything died. Everything was drowned. Everything was blotted out. When you get to 8, verse 3, really starting at verse 2, really, the fountains of the deep, the windows of the heavens were closed. The rain was restrained, so the water stopped. The waters pulled back. So in the end of chapter 7, the waters are rising and things are dying. As chapter 8 begins, the water stops, the water's receding. And at the end of, oh, isn't that a coincidence? 150 days, the water abated. On the 7th month, 7th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. And the waters continued to abate until the 10th month, 1st day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. So at the end of chapter 7, the flood's coming up and killing everything. At the beginning of chapter 8, the waters are coming down. What's in between those two? What's in between those two periods of 150 days? God remembered Noah and everything that was living in the ark. That's the point of the story. That's the point. That's the one part in all of this story that's never repeated. Virtually every other detail, fact, and number is repeated. And it's repeated in ascending and descending order, just like the tip of the arrowhead. The entire point of the story of the flood is to communicate what God's judgment was, why it was, how it ended. Okay. In the telling of the story, though, there's a point. There's a point that God, through His Holy Spirit, wants to make to each and every single generation of human being that comes to this story and reads it. And the point is, God remembered Noah. In all of God's wrath, in all of His just execution of destruction of His creation, what happens? Is it only always ever wrath and destruction? Oh, mercy, mercy. You can hear the bell of mercy ringing. God remembered Noah. He remembered His promise to send one to save humanity and defeat the enemy. He remembered Noah. If He had forgotten Noah, the promise would have been void. God would have lied. He remembered Noah because that promise is coming through Noah. And through Noah, down through the generations, to Jesus. It's going to go from the first Adam, who failed, down through the generations to the second Adam, who will succeed. He will face the temptations and he will overcome them. The first Adam failed, the second Adam will not. But along the way, God has to remember Noah. And in that remembering, we have mercy. You could say Noah was on God's mind. It wasn't completely all wrath and destruction and anger and fury. No, God remembered. And in that remembering, He brings forth a new world, a reshaped planet for the humans to re-inhabit so that they can be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth, and through them the Savior can come. So as you go through this, I hope you'll see the beauty that is in this literary style, this structure. And I think you'll begin to see in many, many stories in the Old Testament this pattern being used. And one of the ways that I like to remember this pattern is being used is when I'm reading a Bible story and I'm getting kind of bored because it's got lots of details and I just heard all about all those details. Why do I need to hear it again and again and again? Oh, yeah. Because this story is written using a different pattern. So then I try and find a little bit about the pattern, and then it leads me to the meaning. That's the most important thing. That's what God wants to get across to us. Have that meaning shape our understanding of this event and of Him and His work in the world. So that is the story of Noah. If you want to see the poster that's in the other room, it kind of looks like this. In the middle of it, you will see a boat, an ark. This is a picture of the ark that is in Kentucky at the Creation Museum and Ark Encounter. It's a life-size boat. I hope if you haven't seen it, you'll go see it and take me. I've seen it a couple times and I just absolutely love it. So it's life-size, and if you look really, really, really closely at the poster, right down here in the corner, you can see people. And this is a live photograph, or I guess is that such a thing, a live photograph? It's a real photograph. Maybe it's not photoshopped or pretend. It's real. And you'll see there the size of the people in comparison to the size and length of the boat. This picture isn't stretched out. This is the size. And I think when you see that, and if you go there and experience it, you can really understand why sometimes I say it's not that God had Noah built an ark that was big enough. It's why did God have Noah build an ark that was so oversized? The thing is enormous. It isn't how could Noah fit all the animals on the ark. It's how many extra basketball courts and tennis courts did Noah have on that thing? Because the animals, oh my gosh, I mean, they would have filled up half of it and the other half would have been empty. It's one of the questions that the Ark Encounter helps us to work through or to imagine. Why was there so much room on the ark? What would Noah have done with all the extra room? And it comes up with some rather fascinating ideas of what he might have done. We don't know for sure, but they're quite plausible. So if you have a chance, go see that in Kentucky and take me. So until next time, and we will continue a little bit of our work still in the story of Noah. I'll have a couple other things to lay out for you. But until then, God bless you.